There's relatively little information on American Flight 11 because it was the first to be reported hijacked and to crash. Its primary purpose was to draw the American public's attention to the events that day in real time. The most important component of George Bush's Flight 11 theory were the calls made by two of its flight attendants,
Betty Young and Amy Sweeney. Therefore, the first question we need to answer is whether the voices we hear come from Betty and Amy. We will proceed in light most favorable to George and his team and assume that they are. The next issue is whether the voices come from Flight 11 while it was in the air, or from somewhere on the ground. We will again put this in light most favorable to George and assume that they came from a commercial airliner that was in midair headed towards the North Tower. Yet, in spite of these favorable concessions, George Bush's theory comes up short. For instance, why would terrorists take the trouble to turn off the transponders and interrupt communications from the cabin, yet allow passengers and crew to make calls and speak, in the case of flight attendants, for over 20 minutes? This is not real terrorism, it's semblance of terrorism. It's as if the hijackers were doing everything in their power to provide testimony for George Bush's theory. The first thing suicide hijackers would have done upon taking control of the plane would be to cut off the airphones. None of the alleged hijackers in any of the flights that day did this. The hijackers made everything easy for George. He got the best of both worlds. On the one hand, he got testimony from passengers and crew to support his theory. On the other, he got testimony from the alleged terrorists themselves, who accidentally confessed to their crimes. How convenient.
So said a slave to his colleague. When my master treats me better than he should, it's because he's gonna sell me. The calls had a couple of things in common. They consisted of short sentences or phrases where the caller
mentioned hijackers, maze, knives, and any other item or action that would reinforce Bush's theory. Very little was said that would truly identify the caller, and for the most part, the callers were eerily calm. Betty Young from Flight 11 allegedly stays on the line with Nydia Gonzalez at the American Airlines security desk for over 20 minutes, all the way until the plane crashes. This is interesting because, according to the NTSB report, the plane is rapidly descending from 5,000 to 1,000 feet, going from 290 knots to 430 knots in 15 seconds.
And they were descending right at the end at 10,000 feet per minute. That is absolutely unheard of for a commercial jet. It is unbelievable for the passengers in the back to withstand that type of force as they're descending. They're actually nosing the airplane down and doing it what I would call a power dive.
Not only is the plane flying way over the manufacturer's specification, but it is flying at a speed in which a 767 begins to break apart. 767 is like a cruise ship, not like a speedboat. More like an 18-wheeler than like a motorcycle. You can't maneuver it around at such high speeds. Even an expert pilot would be unlikely to steer a jumbo 767 at that speed. The plane is allegedly commandeered by Mohammed Atta, an alcoholic, drug addict turned Muslim fundamentalist and suicide bomber, a confirmed CIA asset who could barely fly a Cessna, but who now masterfully steers this jumbo jet at speeds approaching sound and beyond the capability of the craft, and who pinpoints the North Tower from miles away and with expert skill slices into it like a thread through a needle's eye. And he does all of this with a total of 2 pilots and 5 hijackers, a total of 7 people inside the cabin. You gotta hand it to Mohammed, he really pulled a miracle that day. Allah is certainly great. And after allegedly planning the hijacking carefully for over a year, Atta doesn't realize that he's talking to ground controllers rather than to the passengers.
We have some planes that stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport.
Yet, despite that, Mohammed Atta skillfully descends the plane at breakneck speeds. Betty is crooning calmly on the phone, perhaps while doing her nails or smoking a cigarette.
Looking in the back, the cockpit's not answering. Somebody's stabbed in business class. And I think there's mates that we can't breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked. Which flight are you on? Flight 12. we just left Boston. We're up in the air. We're supposed to go to L.A., and the cockpit's not answering their phone.
Okay, but what seat are you sitting in? What's the number of your seat?
Okay, I'm in my jump seat right now.
Okay.
At 3R. Okay, my name is Betty Ong. I'm number 3 on flight 11.
Okay.
And the cockpit is not answering their phone. And there's somebody staffed in business class, and we can't breathe in business class. Somebody's got mace or something.
This is what people sound like when they sense that they are about to die.
Well, there's no one here yet, and the floor is completely engulfed. We're on the floor, and we can't breathe.
Okay.
And it's very, very, very hot.
Are the lights still on?
The lights are on, but it's very hot.
Ma'am.
Very hot. We're all the way on the other side of Liberty, and it's very, very hot.
Hold on 1 second, please.
I'm gonna die, aren't I?
No.
I'm gonna die.
Ma'am, say your prayers. And we're gonna think positive because you gotta help each other get off the floor. Now, stay calm. You're doing good.
These young men, we're not ready to die. How the hell are you going to get my ass down? I need oxygen. You guys didn't see it like it, lady. You get them in from all over. They get in from Jersey. I don't give a shit how high I... Oh, God!
Maybe George Bush should listen to those recordings instead of the ones he provided to the 9/11 Commission.
Let's change a couple of elements in George Bush's hypothesis and see if the recordings that he presented to the 9/11 Commission make a little more sense.
Let's assume that the passengers and crew never boarded the planes. George Bush's team diverted them to a special waiting room, and from there they were secretly taken to the slaughterhouse. One way to get Betty and Amy to come voluntarily is to ask them to participate in a hijacking simulation. After all, on that day, NORAD was coincidentally performing a hijacking drill. Another possibility is that someone put a gun to their heads in real time. The problem with such scenarios is that they leave too much to chance. Flight attendant may accidentally say something that blows the cover off the entire operation at the last moment. More likely scenarios that their voices were recorded and later imitated and synthesized by imposters. Flight attendants placed their bids 1 month in advance. Therefore, George Bush's team had more than enough time to listen in, learn the tones of their voices, and gather personal information. Meanwhile, a military pilot flies the plane along its regular route, and flight controllers monitor the flight on their radars normally. No one suspects anything. Upon receiving a signal, the pilot veers off course and, shortly after, kills the transponder. The flight controllers momentarily lose him on the radar. By the time the air traffic controllers get their bearings back, the pilot has landed Flight 11 safely in a predefined site. The pilot doesn't have to worry about interceptions or shoot-downs because NORAD is carefully monitoring the situation in real time. The U.S. military fire a jumbo-sized guided missile at the North Tower. The speed, the force, and the strike need to be guaranteed. Just imagine the consequences had the missile missed the building. How would George Bush explain the disappearance of the crew and passengers to the public? In fact, the reason George Bush breathed a sigh of relief at the school in Florida is that he was told that neither of the missiles had missed their targets. Of course, an objective way to determine whether what struck the North Tower was a commercial 767 or a missile is by analyzing the data from the voice and flight recorders, popularly known as the black boxes. However, George Bush claims that his team never found any of the black boxes. A couple of on-the-ground searchers say otherwise. The searchers allege that FBI agents told them to keep quiet. Certainly no Arab could have done this. Nevertheless, experts claim that black boxes are always recovered. The record shows that, except in a hard-to-access region like a mountain, the black boxes are always found. Here there was no excuse. The black boxes should have been found at the foot of the towers. Especially in light of the fact that the FBI claims to have found hijacker al-Sakami's passport and the remains of a couple of the flight attendants from the rubble at the foot of the towers. We see here why George Bush's team had to fall back on Betty Ong's subjective testimonial. A simple check of the black box serial and model numbers would have quickly established whether what struck the tower was the authentic Flight 11.
With today's Hollywood technology and no objective evidence, there is no way to establish whether the voice on the tape is that of Betty Young. George Bush needs to come up with more if he's going to base his entire Flight 11 theory on a few phone calls. Certainly George Bush would not be able to prosecute his case in a court of law with such little evidence. The ball is in his court. George Bush has to show that what struck the towers was commercial Flight 11. So far, all we have is hearsay.